Hello, and welcome to my No Cards Build Log Week in Review for Stronghold Kingdoms. Today, I'll be covering the past week, days 115 to 121, and documenting the progress achieved within that time frame. So a few hours ago, I decided to take a look at some of the statistics for this world. And there aren't a whole lot of players in USA 3 anymore, considering it is a new world. If you're going according to the leaderboard, there are currently 3,579 total players in the world, many of which have gone over to the global conflict server. So realistically, it's even fewer. But to put this into perspective, it is still higher than most other English-speaking worlds currently open, with the exception of UK1, which is the original server and has been in play for well over 1,000 days now. In the past few weeks, I believe, shortly after the Global 1 server launched, I was sort of lamenting the very low population figures in this world, but I don't want to discourage players from wanting to play in it, because there are still plenty of players left. Like I said, there are actually more players in it than all of the other English-speaking servers, with the exception of UK1. So this is a great opportunity because there are not going to be a whole lot of Crown Prince players yet, and for players who are still looking to get into the game and they want to experience the high competitive nature of a world with around 20,000 players in it, like the Global 1 conflict server. So USA 3 is still, it would be the first server I would recommend to a new player to the game who isn't interested in getting into the very competitive side of the game. If that description fits you, I believe USA 3 is your ideal server, because like I mentioned before, the average rank of the players in it is going to be far lower than if you joined another world, such as the UK1 server, which has been open since the game's beta launch and has the majority of its player base now is Crown Prince rank. So if you're looking to get in at a lower rank, USA 3 is the ideal world for that. And speaking of rankings, I'm sure as you noticed here, I'm actually Farmer ranked 14, which isn't half bad considering the players above me are probably have more villages. Let's take a look here. Oh yeah, definitely. This player is a prince, a crown prince. So if we're going by that, I am the lowest ranked player this high in this leaderboard. And remember, I haven't played any cards to speak of in this server. So if you look at my stats here, my top 5 rankings, you got Farmer ranked 14, Worker ranked 21, Brewer ranked 26, AI Killer, which is a bit surprising for me because people who kill a lot of AIs, yeah, I'm ranked 29. That's pretty good. And of course, even for points, I'm ranked 56, and I'm only a Duke, which means I'm limited to 8 villages. So once I reach the rank of Prince, I can go up to 15 villages, and the amount of points that I have should really increase exponentially. And speaking of points, despite the fact that now all my villages are represented on the world map with the largest tier icon, I am planning on converting my final non-Highland village, and I'm sure some of you will recognize this one. I was starting to delete some of the buildings in it earlier this morning, and then I got sidetracked. And as I've mentioned in other videos, the reason for this is you should focus on producing the types of goods that you have research invested in, because that will yield the best return on investment. Obviously, there was really no point for me to be producing wine in this valley side village, because all I can do with it is either donate it or sell it. And if I'm going to be selling it, I would be better off selling something like meat that I can make a lot more of. If I'm going to be donating it, well, it can help a little bit, but I'm not making all that much because I don't have all that much research invested in it. So ideally, I would want to buy wine from around my neighboring markets, and this is far more feasible now that the world has aged, because the markets are filling up with resources, essentially. Earlier in the game, that wouldn't be as practical. You would be paying a premium for banquet goods such as wine, but now you can probably find it for under 120 gold per packet. And therefore I can no longer justify retaining that village. So converting it's going to drop me down in points a bit, so I'm going to fall after doing that. And it looks like we have a snake castle in my parish. Now what's interesting, and I should mention this about my research, so I'm just going to show the pig castle here. This is a rather strong pig castle, and one has been appearing in this parish of Baltimore every few days now. And what this is doing is it's really draining my catapults, because it takes around 20-25 catapults to remove it each time. And it pretty consistently is this pig castle, so I need to use the catapults to remove it. So the challenge here is that I haven't invested any research points into the siege mechanics branch of the industry tab. So of course I'm just making 1 catapult per village per day, which isn't enough to keep me stocked. I can ship in catapults from other villages, and I might even be able to buy some from the market, but that is quite impractical. Now, a lot of this guide, this series of videos, was focused on being the sort of player that could act in a supporting role, who could provide resources to fellow faction members and aid them in their conquests. The idea wasn't for me to be a power player of any sorts, not the kind of player who would be sending out armies and stuff. So I was definitely a supporting rank player, but even if you are, investing in siege mechanics is valuable, because there are plenty of fighting players who need catapults. So in hindsight, I probably should have gone after siege mechanics and fully researched that before researching additional farming technologies, because I put over 20 research points into making additional meat when I really didn't need to. But it was bolstering my economy. I've made a significant amount of gold now off of selling meat to the market, as opposed to what I was selling apples for. If apples are selling at an average of 80 gold, maybe 80 to 60, and meat is selling for twice that, you're going to make a significantly greater amount of gold off of selling meat instead. So it wasn't a bad thing researching this. I just wish that I would have prioritized the siege mechanics technology ahead of it. And I guess I'm saying this to show you that there are ways that even I can make mistakes in the game, and I never claimed that I wouldn't or couldn't. So I hope that this is insightful to you and helps you refrain from making the same sort of mistakes. Of course, it all depends on your situation. You know, I've said this multiple times, and that is because it is so relevant to the situation. You're going to need different technologies depending upon your play style and the players around you. There is no one-size-fits-all approach to this, and I simply believe that my approach is probably one of the better ones that a free-to-play player could adopt in terms of a research loadout. So with that out of the way, let's jump right over to the research that I completed in the past 7 days. Starting with the farming tab, and as I was over here a minute ago, you probably noticed this, but I invested an additional 7 points into the Buchery technology, maxing it out now at level 8, which gives me an increased 50% productivity boost to my meat production. The remaining technology points I accrued in the past 7 days, all of which were invested in a couple of branches in the education tab of the research tree. So as you know, last week I was still researching housing capacity. I've since maxed it out by putting an additional 2 points in it. It's now at level 8, which means all of my hovels now hold an additional 2 peasants in each, for a total of 8. The last 2 points were allocated into Extreme Unction, and this is going to help me complete a quest pretty soon, because I have a whole bunch of quests that require me to send excommunication to players to complete it. Let's just jump right over to the quests and get this out of the way. So as you may recall, in last week's video, I completed around 20 quests. Well, this week has been significantly slower, and I only completed a total of 5. those being Viper's Nest 2, Team Player 5, Daring Raid 3, Rat Hunt 3, and of course Flourishing Trade 7. And I mentioned in the research tree that I had several quests that required me to send excommunications to complete. These quests go by the name of Persecutor, and I have 3 levels of them unlocked already. Level 3 requires me to send 250 hours of excommunication, and as you can see, if I don't have Extreme Unction maxed out, it's going to cost me a lot of faith points to complete. Oh, and I forgot to mention, as you can see here, I have quite a few research points building up now. It appears that my research is actually slower than the rate at which I'm achieving sub-rank. So my research times are now up to 14 hours and 45 minutes. It's almost 15 hours. So as you can see, my research is lagging a bit behind what I could be doing because I have 9 points in the bank, so to speak. Given my rank, I've progressed quite well in the past week. Last week at this time, I was a Duke 14th rank, and this week I'm a Duke 9th rank. So if I continue on at this rate, within the next 2 weeks, I should hit the rank of Prince, which was great news because that is my goal. That was my goal when starting this series, really, was to document my progress to the rank of Prince. Once I got to Prince, I was intending on terminating it. And in a way, this should be good for the audience because it will allow me to focus my efforts more on the new global conflict server, which there is vastly more interest in at this moment. In regards to world politics on the USA 3 server, things have really changed. As you may notice, House 9 doesn't exist on the map anymore. Now, my house and House 16 were both fighting House 9. But seeing as House 9 is all but gone, really, the remaining players are slowly folding into other houses, we really are left without a war to fight. And House 10 has sort of vowed to remain neutral in conflicts between other houses. So they didn't get involved with our skirmish with House 9, and they don't plan on getting involved in any other houses' skirmishes as well. It'll be interesting to see if House 16 starts to push House 10, because if you take a look at the glory race, House 10 is the clear leader. So the question is, does House 16 want to push House 10 out of the leadership? Because they've had their issues with several House 10 factions in the past, and now that House 16, I see a lot of their players moving into House 10, it's questionable whether or not there can remain a peace in this world, a worldwide peace essentially, because House 16 and House 10 are now the 2 predominant houses in this world. Of course, House 14 is still neutral. You have House 17 up there in Maine with JJ Cashflow. He's really the only, I hear he's a good player, but he's the only real player in that house. And as you can see, House 17, it must not be all that active on this world because their villages are full of disease and a considerable amount of flags. So it will be interesting to see how this goes down. If we do see another big war yet before this server is sort of, because that's what happens a lot of the time, is there will be a couple of big houses, there will be a civil war of sorts. One house will remain or emerge victorious, and the other house will move largely off of this server onto a different one, and then from then on, the server, from that age on, the server is generally dominated by that single winning house, and we can sort of see that formation taking place already. I would have to say that unless House 16 receives aid from various other houses, it is unlikely that they could take out House 10 right now. House 10 has a lot of good players, and even if they really aren't all that interested in fighting, they appear to be content with farming their way to the glory race victory. But again, that is something that I am interested in and will be keeping an eye out for in the next few weeks. I didn't cover the politics of this world last week because really there hadn't been a whole lot changing. Yes, House 9 was receding, but they still held quite a few counties over here on the west coast. That simply isn't the case anymore. Now a lot of them have flipped to House 10. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Well, I believe that pretty much concludes everything I have to say for this week. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I do hope to see you next time.
Stronghold Kingdoms. What will you fight for? Play now for free.
So what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do?